Good evening. I was told I have a very specific ending time because we have to go to the boat. So if you ask questions, I think I'm going to be in trouble. So I promise you there'll be no technical discussion. You've had enough technical for today. I think there's some wonderful things that have been discussed. Let's just take it easy, light, soft, maybe gentle, and talk about philosophy. Is that better than technical? One yay. Okay, good. Yay. So we go forward then. Great. This is the philosophy for analyzing doubt and deception, and it goes by many names. It's been called incongruity analysis. It's been called the theory of humor, incongruity theory. There's many names to it. And a long time, I'd say 1880s or so, there was a student of Dr. Joe Bell, Scottish physician. And he took and he learned from Dr. Bell what Dr. Bell called the method. And this young person, by the name of Arthur Doyle, in 1887 created the world's most famous detective, Sherlock Holmes, from the theory of what we're going to be discussing today. Or not. Is this the right one? So that's wrong. Okay, so agenda, have to have an agenda. Epistemology, philosophy. We'll get through the philosophy real quick and we'll put it to practical application as quickly as possible so nobody gets hurt. So here, everyone's favorite, Rene Descartes. The tree is the key. It's a tree of knowledge. Most of you probably are familiar with this. The roots, metaphysics. The trunk is physics. And there are three basic branches: medicine, mechanics, and ethics. But in all of these things, there's doubt. And one thing we learned from what Descartes teaches is it's not just important to consider the tree, but you have to consider and investigate everything that is related to the tree, where it's planted, how much water it gets, how much care and nurturing it gets, and so on. So understanding the validity of everything that gives life to the tree of knowledge is important. All right. So let's talk the philosophy part. In the first meditation, Descartes sets out and he explains several arguments of doubt of all his previously held beliefs. He's cautious, but a very objective observer to what's happening. And he first observes that the senses are sometimes deceived. And this is key in what we do. He noticed that an object might be considered far away and small, but his senses are deceived because the object is actually rather big. So it's not prudent to accept what your senses can feed to you because you've been deceived by your senses. And this happens to us in life all the time. You might be able to identify a commercial on TV. You thought you were going to get one product and you received another product. You might have been sold something and you realized when you got it home it wasn't what you wanted. The same concept. But Descartes goes on to argue that although this may apply to the sensations derived under certain circumstances, doesn't it seem certain that, as Descartes said, quote, "I am here, sitting by the fire, wearing a winter dressing gown, holding this piece of paper in my hand," and so on. He pointed out that even though the senses deceive us sometimes, what basis for doubt would you actually have that you're sitting here listening to a discussion right now? Why would you doubt that you're sitting here listening to me? You see me on the stage, and you're part of this moment. Fast forward to something that stops us all from being able to solve problems and to distinguish between reality and something that's just not there. Descartes' doubt was all based in the fact that you could be in a dream right now, right? But are you in a dream about being here and therefore not actually here? And everyone here, we won't get that far into it, but you understand what it is. Here, you're fighting with yourself the whole time. There's numerous cognitive biases that exist. You can be in a situation of information overload. You could lack context in something. You could receive information not in a timely manner, and you have to make a very fast decision. What should we remember? What's the takeaway? What's the key point that's trying to be driven home? Our senses play a game with us, a very dangerous game, that we're all too happy and all too comfortable with. Deceptions. Two types of deception. That's what it boils down to. The art of deception, studying deception from magicians to a car salesman who's going to sell you the greatest automobile you've ever purchased in your life, and it's only going to cost 500 euro, but it'll be great, and you'll drive it for 100 years. A type of deception, ambiguity increasing. What does that mean? Basically, that means that there is a bunch of information. You're looking at one piece of information, you have another piece of information, and you're getting numerous feeds of information that are coming into you, and you're receiving it through your senses, and you're trying to make sense of what you see. The key with ambiguity increasing is that your level of doubt goes up. You become more doubtful of all the information that you're receiving, and you can't make sense of what the truth is and what's a dream. The M type is misleading. I may have the truth over here, but I'm not going to show you that. I'm going to show you something over here. That brand new 6-year-old 500 euro automobile. That's much better because I know you don't have enough money for it. I'm going to sell you this one right here. And you're going to love it. You're going to be happy with what I give you. The difference here, what you're sold is going to decrease your doubt because you're being sold a very specific target. So you have A, where you become more doubtful, more confused, and M, misleading, where you are very certain that you're making the right decision. You have no doubt at that point. Doubt and the absence of doubt must be considered equally in what we do. It's kind of like Schrodinger's interpretation of Descartes. You have doubt and you have no doubt in the same situation at the same time. And you have to be a good arbiter of what's there. You have to be a good arbiter of the information and figure out exactly what's going on. Because our biases, our perception of things will confuse us, and it'll hurt your mind. Initial perceptions can obscure the mental vision of any innate principles that we hold. Let's take a moment. Look at my beautiful piece of abstract expressionism. If I told you that all the green lines are straight, would you doubt me? Could you doubt me? Is it reasonable? Would you have thought about those lines being straight if I didn't mention it? Or would have you just gone along with what you saw? Let's go one further. Is the mind able to think of something that's not there? Can the mind think of not something? If I tell you, I don't want you to think about an elephant, what's the first thing you're going to think about? Oh, come on, anybody. Elephant, thank you. One person thinks of an elephant. The experiment failed. So why do you think of an elephant when I say, please don't think of an elephant? Because you can't stop yourself. How many different colored balls are up there? 3? 3. How about 1? One color ball. Can you bring yourself to the point where you can see the one color of the ball? Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? You're struggling to focus on the balls and to verify they're the same color, and you're trying to, in your head, keep those balls the same color as you move around the picture. But your mind will draw away as you look to one side to the other. The balls will change color again. And you are accepting the deception. You can't stop it. There it goes. All right. In a deception, the key of what you want to do is decided by the type of deception. If I have ambiguity increasing, that's designed for a general population. If I don't know what my network defenders know, if I don't know their skill level, if I don't know their education, their situational awareness, how good their tools are, I'll use something like that. I'll increase ambiguity. I'll make multiple things happen, and they'll have to decide, waste resources, spend time, figure out what's the right answer. Misleading is just the opposite. Misleading is where you focus to achieve your deception. You focus on the decision maker. I don't care about anybody else who's in the chain. I have a bright, shiny thing, and I want that decision maker to do something. What I'll do is I will make sure that I have some tests, and I'll do what's called conduit validation. I'm going to make sure that the message that I've packaged gets handed from one person to the next and presented to the decision maker the way I want it presented to that person. And because I have one person, I have good information on that person. I'm not shooting it out to everybody, but I have that one person in mind. I'm going to have high confidence that that person will react the way I want them to. It's not taking a chance. It's actually using those balls to show the picture that I want, to make the decision maker, the person who is the CISO, the CSO, the CEO, demand a policy change. I'm going to go right to the top. Somebody who has influence to make a decision to impact what you're trying to do. If you ever have the discussion with someone about politics, we're not going to get into politics, but if we're going to have a discussion, you have one perspective and you have a counter perspective. Did you ever notice that in most discussions or arguments that there's only two sides to the coin? There's only one way to look at it or the other, the pro or the con. By limiting your ability to interpret the data, you're only given two choices. You can only have one or the other. So you are either 100% correct in what you do or 100% incorrect. This is a control method for managing doubt and implementing a deception. I'm sure that you could probably identify numerous cases where you've come across this in your life, and it could be something very simple as implementing a control at work, or when you get home with your spouse. How do you, for example, hello honey, I'm home, let's go out to dinner. Okay, let's go out to dinner. Not a deception, we'll go out to dinner, okay? Good. And what's the first question you ask your spouse? Where do you want to go to dinner? Well, that puts a lot of pressure on one person. That's one side. You're only going to get one answer that way. But if you say, possibly, let's go to dinner, what don't you want for dinner? More people will have a list of places that they don't want to go to, as opposed to being forced into one small answer that they think that you're going to agree with. My wife likes Chinese food, Thai food. I could go right down the list. I know what she's going to say yes to, but giving that option to someone, well, aren't you more generous to them? Isn't it nicer to ask them what they prefer not to do? We can go to McDonald's. Yes? No, I don't want to go to McDonald's. Nobody wants to go to McDonald's. Oh, okay, well, I have all these things that I could do. You're guiding the discussion. Oh, come on, man. There we go. So in the lottery, lotteries have been around for many years. This is a good example of a deception. Lotteries are designed to take a whole bunch of money from a whole bunch of people that don't have a lot of money and push it to people who have a lot of money who want more money. That's all lotteries do every single time. What happens when some poor person on the street wins 500 million euro in a lottery? How fast are they back on the street? How fast do people come in and take the money from? I'm a financial advisor. I can help you invest your money this way and that way. You'll be set for life, and before you know it, all the money is gone. The question isn't whether I can win the lottery or not win the lottery. The question should be obvious, is that how do I play the lottery? Why do I play the lottery? Who makes money on the lottery? Those are the questions you should be asking yourself before you engage in the lottery. And the same thing would happen in numerous other venues. Why am I engaged in the game? So, let me see if I can run the video.
Timeline and understand what happened in that context, but I also think that we need to take very seriously that. Whoa!
Camera fell down.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So the camera fell down. What did you just see? You see, here's a famous news anchor, Jake Tappert, on a very trusted news source, CNN, showing you a reporter in front of a seat of authority at the American White House, and they're giving you very important information. And somebody kicked the camera, but also kicked the screen. So going back to what Descartes was talking about doubt, do you actually trust them now that they deliberately deceived you from what they were doing? Can you trust them anymore? Can you trust any news source? Should you? Just a thought.
Timeline and
Oh, there we go. It wasn't that long ago. And just so you see here, I have an asterisk next to the director's name, William Colby. That's because he was deceased by a very strange situation. And you can go look that up on Wikipedia if you like. But William Colby said something very interesting in what was called the Church Commission back in 1976. He said the press has been manipulated by governments for years. And it was said that the CIA had run a program called Operation Mockingbird, where they put people into the press to manage their presence in the press. They managed propaganda that was being pushed out back during the Cold War, and it was targeted at the Soviet Union. So who in the press was targeted? Well, it was CBS, Time Magazine, the New York Times, ABC, NBC, AP, UPI, Reuters. I could go on. But these guys targeted and used the media to spread false information. Now, how many other governments around there have spread false information through the media? Do we know? What level of doubt do you have about what these guys are selling you? Here's a good example. Non-governmental. This guy right here, I want to be like him. He sold absolutely nothing. Nothing. For 18,000 US dollars. And it's important, though, because the nothing that he was selling had to be displayed in a 5 by 5 foot square in a private space so you could experience nothing. Now, I don't know how much time it takes a sculptor or an artist to create nothing, but I'm sure that he was paid very well for what he didn't do. In 1980, control of the media in the States was managed by 50 different companies. By 2018, there was only 5 companies that controlled information in the States.
Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about troubling and irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 So the message is, this is extremely dangerous to our democracy. Yeah, you got it. Very good. All right. So there was 107 news channels. 107. And they all played exactly the same script. Not saying it was deceptive, I'm just saying it was awkward. So here's another former CIA director, William Casey. In the first cabinet meeting that he had with then President Ronald Reagan, he said, "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false." This is our director of intelligence over in the States. How comfortable do you think we should feel about that? It's kind of a little concerning as far as I can say. So remember I mentioned abstract expressionism before? In 1950, in the States, we also created what was called the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And they promoted different abstract expressionists and other cultural events. You can see Jackson Pollock in the center there. Abstract expressionism rose out of nowhere in the 40s to significant prominence. And all Jackson Pollock did was drip paint on a canvas. And just like the previous picture I showed you, what was the message there? What was the deception there? What's happening here? He made that multi-million-dollar piece of art up at the top there. I'm not sure I would have paid that much for it, but so it goes. Last video clip for you, just to kind of get an idea. People will believe what they're told. Anybody believe that? Oh, see, very good.
A decade earlier, psychologist Stanley Milgram had also looked at how we respond to authority. In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. Where? Teacher.
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud, horse, rock, house. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer, horse.
Oh. Experiment, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
You refuse to go on? The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're going to get a shock. 180 volts.
Ow! I can't stand the pain. Let me out of
You
here.
can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man today. I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next one, slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
Two-thirds of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering for less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
So, does this tell you something about today, yesterday? This experiment has been repeated over and over again. And people in different countries and different cultures, they react the same way. If they believe someone has legitimate authority, they will do whatever is asked of them, in most cases. In some cases, there's too much to lose. You have too much invested. You can't afford to take that risk. On the other hand, some people will play right along with the deception and not question it, ever. So in order to not get yelled at by Wynn, we're going to jump forward a little bit more because we only have a certain time left. This is a great opportunity to discuss asymmetric dominance. It's a technique that's used on people. Basically, think about what you're focusing on right now. Now what are you focusing on? I'm controlling where you're going. Maybe not everybody, but most people. A lot of you are going to watch this young kid solve 3 juggling Rubik's Cubes in less than 3.5 minutes. But we're not going to do that. Asymmetric dominance is extremely important in increasing doubt, but in more so removing doubt. It's giving you that full deception in that your confidence is going to drop and your confidence is going to increase, and you're going to be very confident about what you're doing. It's not ambiguity increasing, it's misleading. Asymmetric dominance means basically you have 2, 3, 4 choices, but I'm going to draw you to the one that I want you to focus on. And you are going to go right along because you're not going to assume that anything's happening. Your doubt level is extremely low. Beliefs, there is some new research in the last 10 years that show how our beliefs can actually be impacted by neurotransmitter activities. Our neurological system actually helps to reinforce what our beliefs are. And for the sake of time, we can discuss that. If you'd like to talk about it on the boat tonight, we can talk about that. Let me go here. So, mitigation for deception. Basically, the bottom line is awareness. Always be aware. Acknowledge that you have doubt for something. Don't be afraid of it. Engage your doubt. And what I mean by that is be comfortable in the fact that you're doubtful. Be comfortable in the fact that you're not doubtful. There's a reason why you have doubt, and there's a reason why you don't have doubt. The most important aspect is to be confident in your skills and your capabilities. You've seen the several examples that I showed you of deceptive activity. Some is intentional, some's not intentional. Some by government, some by private organizations. It's all around you. The key for you is to ensure that you can doubt and be comfortable in a contested information environment. What we want you to understand is that it's not going to get any easier. You're going to get more information. Information overload is not going away. Information overload has been around for 250 years. We've talked about it. So you're going to have to be able to maneuver within the noise. Does your adversary talk about Sun Tzu and then enact Clausewitz? Or talk about Clausewitz and enact Sun Tzu? Be aware of who the adversary is. Don't be afraid to question their motives or identify what their motives are, and then put countermeasures in place before they get to you. Check the calibration of your calibration equipment. If you use something to calibrate, possibly the calibration point is moving a little bit, like 1/10 of 1 degree over time. It won't move enough out of the standard deviation for you to notice it. But 6 months from now, 8 months from now, something like that, the point of calibration will have moved, and it won't be what you need in your technical specs for it to be accurate anymore. Be aware of what you use to calibrate, because that's just as important as what you're calibrating. And always question if you see an artifact. A deception creates two artifacts. One is the true, one is the deception story. Both artifacts are existing at the same time. You have to use what's called the abductive process as opposed to a deductive process. Abductive, you work from the back forward, right? You've seen what's happened, and you have to go and figure out what's happened. That's the Sherlock Holmes method. That's the only successful way to root out deceptions. So, abductively is a way to be able to solve deception problems. Be comfortable. Be comfortable in who you are, what you're doing. Trust yourself. Trust. You get a log file, you get PCAP. That information is pretty solid. Trust the information that you have like that. If you see incongruities, you have to abductively solve those problems in order to figure out what deception is happening. Identify who the key person is that somebody who is a deceiver wants to manipulate, they want to raise doubt in that person. They want them to be off balance. And you have to be able to communicate that to that decision maker so that they're not confused about what's happening, so they understand what's going on, so they're not drawn into the deception. And I'll leave you with the thought because it's important. Again, I have to say it again. Be comfortable with the noise. Be comfortable with the doubt that you're going to have. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's how you beat deception, with counter-deception. The deceiver wants you to be off balance. They want you to be off balance so you have a reaction, and you react that same way every single time. If you move and you shift that paradigm, they're looking for something to happen and you don't give it to them. You've won that round, and you're better positioned to deal with them going forward into the future. And with that, Win, I have 4 minutes. Are there any questions? No. Is anybody still alive? Okay, good. With that, I thank you for tonight, and I will see you all on the boat.